as the mayor of Tshwane with immediate effect.
He was disqualified just 3 days ago by the city manager, Tshwane Mayor, who claimed that Makorela was an unrehabilitated insolvent. That was in response to, Makorela has now submitted the outstanding certificate proving his rehabilitation.
In correspondence seen by Newsroom Africa this morning, Meklas informed Makorela that a security detail will be reinstated and that Makorela should be capable of ready to be collected to resume his duties as executive mayor.
Let's talk more about this now with Dr Corne Mulder, the chief whip of the Freedom Front Plus. A very good evening to you, so grateful for your time. So now that the certificate has been presented proving that the mayor is a rehabilitated insolvent, can Tshwane put this chapter behind it?
Unfortunately not. I'm afraid things are getting to get worse before it's going to get any better. I will choose my words carefully. I believe that we need to look at the so-called rehabilitation certificate with a huge magnifying glass. And I think we've got reason to believe that there may be a huge problem here.
What do you mean by problem? Are you saying it's not a legitimate certificate?
I'm saying that there are a number of questions that need to be asked about what has happened since yesterday. And I can give you the details in that instance. For example, Dr. Makorela claims that he was rehabilitated in February of 2018 in terms of the document that he provided. But we can't find any proof in the Government Gazette of any advertisement in terms of an application process for his rehabilitation. As a matter of fact, what we do find are advertisements in the Government Gazette on dates later than that, in 2019, in 2020, in terms of provisions of the Insolvency Act that indicates that that process was still going on. In other words, calling on creditors to bring their claims, etc., etc. Now that is impossible to do if the rehabilitation has been completed as been claimed by Dr. Makorela in February of 2018. But it goes beyond that. If you look at the so-called court order, anyone who knows what a court order should look like will find this specific alleged court order very, very strange in terms of the wording, in terms of everything on that document. There are various examples. For example, the sequestration application had a specific case number.
Mm-hmm.
The rehabilitation application should have a different court number, but in this instance it's exactly the same court number. And if you look at the wording, for example, the alleged certificate talks about in the North Court. There's no North Court in South Africa. The correct wording should be in the High Court of South Africa in the North Gauteng Division. And that's just one example. There are numerous examples. The fact of the matter is that the trustee in this whole case that deals with this insolvency process are not aware of any rehabilitation and has not delivered any report to the Master of the Supreme Court, and there's no report from the Master of the Supreme Court to the High Court, which is an absolute necessity to do a rehabilitation. So all I'm saying is there is something, I think, very, very wrong in this claim by Dr. Makorela.
So you've got several issues that you find questionable then with the documentation that has now been produced by the mayor. How do you go about proving your suspicion that these aren't legit documents?
We have documentation that we've been able to get hold of in the last 24 hours. And all that documentation indicates that there's a huge problem. For example, any journalist that is interested in investigative reporting should speak perhaps to the attorney called James Ndebele. The attorney James Ndebele was contacted yesterday and asked to bring an urgent application for rehabilitation on behalf of Dr. Makorela, I'm told. Now, if you've been rehabilitated in 2018 as you claim, why would you bring an urgent or try to bring an urgent court application which doesn't exist for rehabilitation yesterday? I'm also informed that this Mr. James Ndebele has been, his mandate has been cancelled. He's no longer the attorney. And subsequently, a miracle happens, and a few hours later on, an alleged court order is produced and given to the municipal manager claiming that there was a rehabilitation already in February of 2018.
So, excuse me, with that in mind then, what you say was an urgent application for rehabilitation yesterday, and by the mayor's version, even when he was disqualified for those few days, he was saying, well, he had been rehabilitated a while ago, and the only issue was basically finding the paperwork. Do you think that was a lie?
I'm also trying to find the paperwork that says I won the lottery. It doesn't work that way. You know that you have been rehabilitated, or you know that you've not been rehabilitated. All the documentation indicates that there's been no rehabilitation. The documentation that has been provided, we are scrutinizing that at the moment with a huge process here. The basic question is, for Dr. Makorela to be the mayor, he needs to be a councillor. To be a councillor, he needed to be rehabilitated before November of 2021. The indication is clearly that that is not the case, and the court order, the so-called court order produced and given to the municipal manager, is highly questionable. So let me take a safe option and say I dispute those documentation, and we are looking into that, and all the indication that we've got at the moment is that there's something very, very wrong here.
So, Dr. Mulder, just finally, are you looking into the documents, the legitimacy of these documents, authenticity, excuse me, with a view to challenging this whole process in court? Is that what you ultimately want to do?
Well, let's do the investigation, but as far as I'm concerned, there's a huge question mark about this alleged rehabilitation or the alleged court order that is being provided with, and we will look into that. And if it proves that it is a false document, then obviously the implications would be huge. We will be talking about fraud, we were talking about defeating the ends of justice. It's got huge implications. I just hope for Dr. Makorela's sake that I'm wrong.
And I would imagine that Dr. Makorela, if he's watching this conversation, would say, well, if you don't, or if you're still going to investigate these suspicions that you have about these documents, then perhaps it's not wise, or it may even be irresponsible to go public with these questions until you're sure that you can back it all up. Everything that you have said tonight, would you be able to back it up?
I believe that the facts speak for themselves. I think the dates speak for themselves. There are just too many things that are questionable around here, and it would be irresponsible to withhold this from South Africa and from the public, and to go along with the charade as if everything is in order. I believe it's not.
When should we expect to hear what the way forward will be from your end? And by your end, I'm referring to the FF Plus and the broader coalition.
I'm not speaking on behalf of the FF Plus. I'm speaking as a person that are very much involved in the coalition of the city of Tshwane. I believe that we will have much clearer action and answers in this regard within the next 24 to 48 hours.
All right. When you do have those details, we'll come back to you, Sir Dr. Corne Mulder, Chief Whip of the Freedom Front Plus, speaking to us as a member of the coalition in the capital, Tshwane.
Well,